Hello, AP US History students. Having a few technical difficulties with recording this review for Unit 2, so I may have to break it up into 3 or maybe even 4 smaller sections, because every time I get up close to 6 or 7 minutes, it just shuts down on me, so I don't know why that is. But going forward, it cut me off as we were just talking about, or as I was going into my monologue about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. DuBois. Booker T. Washington was more conservative about his approach. He wanted to give African Americans the job skills, have them work in the Tuskegee Institute, and do other things to basically advance themselves not through activism, not through a kind of intellectual approach, but by just hitting the grindstone and getting those work skills, your job skills together, and then going out in the job market. The problem, though, that W.E.B. DuBois was pointing out was that even if you have those job skills and you're the best worker for the job, you may not get that job because of the racial issues at the time. So it's not going to be until W.E.B. DuBois' activism and intellectual education emphasis is going to see its full effect with the Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, Medgar Evers and others. And of course, what you'll want to remember there is that the contrasting position, Booker T. Washington's policies of political passivity and vocational training, and W.E.B. DuBois' position of activism and intellectual education. Going on from there, of course, you had Herbert Spencer, who took the ideas of from Darwin's Origin of Species and combined those to come up with this idea of social Darwinism. And this was used, of course, to say, well, if poor are poor, or the downtrodden are downtrodden, it's because that's part of evolution. And if they're poor, so be it. Maybe less of them will produce, and what we'll have is only the fittest will survive and move forward, and the society will advance in a kind of eugenics way. The best genes will survive. Now, to contrast that, we have Henry George, who Henry George was born in 1839, and he went out to sea. He did not have a formal education, and he said that real poverty would become a thing of the past, and that he was a self-taught economist, and he learned a lot from the very jobs he'd had as a young man. But he actually inspired the reform movement in the United States to kind of uplift the lower classes and try to help people move out of poverty. And his book was called Progress in Poverty. So Henry George's ideas are going to influence a lot of reform-minded folk. And then with Charlotte Perkins Gilman at this time is writing great stories such as The Yellow Wallpaper. She's also publishing an essay called Women in Economics, and this is going to point out that the innocence that's talked about in the American female, as the Ladies' Home Journal is celebrating the fact that they're wearing these skirts and they're allowed to play golf, and they're starting to enter the factory system a little bit more. But really, the innocence that's talked about the American female is really a code word for the ignorance. And so her position was that in Women in Economics was that it was a way of repressing the women as a social class. According to George Washington Plunkett, political machines at this time survived because of what he called honest graft. And while that's kind of an oxymoronic pairing of words, he had a point. There was kind of the good old boy mentality of Washington and state politics, was that if you could get the job done, even if it may have been in a corrupt way by paying people off or offering favors, that this was a kind of honest graft. And some voters actually sympathize that with. However, as political machines gain more power, the good old boy approach is looked on as just pure corruption, and that's going to sink some of these political parties. Richard T. Ely and a group of young economists are that fresh group that have this kind of pre-Keynesian idea, demonstrating that the errors of having too much faith in the laissez-faire system the system, the free market system, held that theories of in opposition of traditional Adams-inspired invisible hand and self-interest, the idea that your kind of natural propensity toward greed and improving the situation for yourself and your family is going to be the market's natural way of regulating itself. You don't need government intervention to step in. Well, Richard T. Ely is going to go against that, and his group of Johns Hopkins educated theorists are going to start the American Economic Association, and it urged government intervention in economic affairs. The American Economic Association linked economics and social problems and urged the government to move forward in economic affairs, to intervene. Many parallels there to our current situation in moving from the free market affairs of a moderate Clinton, a more free market approach of Bush, and now Obama's position of having the right kind of regulation to stimulate the market and right kind of government interventions, as he puts it. Significant medical developments in Victorian America included all the following, and it gives you a list there, including antiseptic practices, painless surgery, the discovery of germs, that germs cause disease, and of course this was actually earlier on, but this was starting to be more of a revelation for the individual at the time. But the big thing is they couldn't prevent tuberculosis, typhoid, and diphtheria, and these diseases were still a big part of American society and threatening public health in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The Mckinley Tariff used high tariff duties to promote new industries. It promoted tin plate for packaging canned goods to try to stimulate the production of tin, but it was really kind of an inefficient way of supporting that industry. In 1890, the American electorate rejected the Republican legislative activism by crushing the party in the congressional elections. And this, of course, was kind of a rejection of the laissez-faire politics of the time. And which of the following is not true of the American farmers in 1865 and 1890? It's going to give you a list of things that did happen, and those are productivity increased, farm mortgages were common, and prices for their crops declined. These are all true. However, their purchasing power increased, actually, did not decrease. Despite the fact that farmers received less for their crops, their purchasing power actually increased, and you can review that on page 579 of your text. Let's see, just wrapping this up here. I might have to break this up into two sections like I mentioned before. Colored Farmers Association or Alliance in the 1890s ended when a posse lynched 15 cotton pickers who were on strike. In 1894, Jacob S. Coxey led a march in Washington, D.C. to demand road construction. Remember, we talked about this early on at the beginning of the chapter. He actually marched to Washington with all these workers saying, well, give us jobs, we want to create jobs, we want to build roads. And the police and National Guard told him, no, sorry, you're not going to go forward. So he wanted to stimulate the economy by creating road construction projects to employ the jobless. I'm going to pause here, come back to you, AP US History students, in a moment. Keep studying, keep reviewing that chapter. The quiz you want to finish that up as soon as possible and get back to me with any of your questions, and I'll talk to you soon.